Buongiorno a tutti, iniziamo questa giornata di presentazioni con la presentazione del primo premio del Urban Press Award, selezionato da 5 magazine internazionali che sono Il Fotografo, Art Daily, Tag Re, Quarto Oscuro e Open Eyes. Abbiamo qui l'autore Krzysztof Bednarski che dialogherà con Giovanni Pelloso, capo redattore del Fotografo e giornalista. Lascio a voi la parola. Grazie.
Grazie mille. Buongiorno a tutti. Ben felice di essere qui con voi oggi e ben felice di incontrare Krzysztof per questa occasione. Prima di iniziare a entrare nel vivo del suo lavoro, mi piacerebbe conoscere e far conoscere un po' il percorso di Krzysztof, perché arriva da esperienze diverse. Lui è un visual storyteller, un filmmaker, un documentary filmmaker, e quindi ha incontrato la fotografia a metà del 2010. Quindi è interessante, forse questa è la prima domanda da porre, cosa la fotografia gli ha dato rispetto ad altri linguaggi e cosa gli altri linguaggi, cioè linguaggi, come dire, dei quali lui forse gli è più confidenza, non hanno. Cosa ha trovato nella fotografia in più rispetto ad altri linguaggi contemporanei?
Right, so hello, good morning. I'll just before I answer your question, thank you, for having me here and for this for the possibility of this conversation. And I don't know if I will have a lot of very intelligible, eloquent things to say, but also if you do have any questions, then afterwards, I'll be glad to answer. So I'll just say a couple of words to answer your question about myself and my photography, because actually the reason I do photography and I take these photos is very specific for me, for myself. In the past, like 13 years ago, I used to do some commercial photography, but some completely different style of photography, which was more studio photography, for a little bit. But then sort of I shifted away from photography in like a professional manner into design, animation, and other visual storytelling things, but not photography. But I always liked to take photos, and now the reason why I started doing street photography was actually a very personal one, because I always had a lot of problems with anxiety, anxiety, panic attacks and everything, And closer, even okay, I can try to speak closer and louder. Yes, so like I was saying, I always had problems with anxiety, and about 10 years ago, so I wasn't doing photography professionally. I just found this as like this way of spending time that sort of calms me down personally. So, just to travel somewhere completely alone, without anybody, for 10 days, without answering any emails, without talking to anybody, just to mentally get away from the everyday tasks, and just go somewhere, walk the streets, observe people, and take some photos while I'm doing it. So it's actually just like street photography for me, and just documenting, and is just a very calming experience for me. So that's sort of the reason why I started doing street photography. But when we go on to this series, actually, it's a little bit different from what I usually do. So also, I think I can show you in a little bit what I usually do, and then we can talk about this series maybe a little bit as well.
Okay. Noi andranno per il
Okay. All right.
Parisian Night Stories è il titolo della sua opera.
Okay.
Ma è questa?
Forse
Non è il portfolio. No.
questo è il portfolio che ho usato.
Ah, ok. È sempre il suo materiale. Parisian Night Stories è il progetto premiato ed è interessante perché la giuria in qualche modo si è soffermata su questo lavoro, nel senso che è un lavoro, chiamiamolo di street photography, ma assume in sé delle atmosfere quasi sognanti, delle particolari atmosfere che portano oltre la fredda realtà forse del quotidiano. Questo essere tra una realtà e invece un mondo che fa parte forse di un immaginario, di una visione personale rispetto anche alla città che si incontra, è stato uno dei luoghi forse più interessanti per la giuria da esplorare. Mi piacerebbe, visto appunto l'attenzione di Christopher nel non definirsi un fotografo, diciamo così, di profondità, nel senso che dove c'è sentimento, dove c'è dentro solamente o propriamente il proprio sé, invece è la realtà ciò che è apparso e ciò che lui è riuscito a cogliere. Quindi mi sembra interessante che ci racconti questa Parigi che ho incontrato e poi come si è evoluto il lavoro.
Right. Okay. And also to answer your question, but in a very roundabout way, but eventually I will get to your question. So yes, basically just to compare, I just wanted to show a couple of slides of what I usually do. So this isn't of course the Persian Night Stories. These are examples of the work that I usually do. So of course it is candid, documentary, street photography, just catching moments in the street, you know, and but I think you know there's probably always different reasons and what influences a style, you know, of a photographer. I don't know if in my case I can identify all these reasons, but what I can always, you know, think of. So this is photography that I usually do, which are portraits, you know, candid portraits in the street. But I also love architecture. So the people in my photographies are always somewhere small, surrounded by the city, surrounded by, you know, people in their surroundings. So it's always sort of an examination of the surroundings and how people fit in these surroundings. And so now to bring this conceptual idea, just to give you a more practical reason why I do this style of photography, is because, and now going back to what I said in the beginning, I'm also quite an introvert. So I always felt very nervous of taking photographs of, you know, strangers in the street. So I took these photographs from far away. So it's a very practical reason, right? So just staying, I'm not sort of the kind of person, photographer, who is brave enough to come very close to people. So I was always staying, you know, quite far from everyone. So that's my sort of practical reason for this. And Yeah, so this is the style of photography that I usually do, and I think regarding the style that you mentioned, that they don't necessarily look like only typical documenting, but there is something dreamlike. Well, for me that's a compliment, so thank you. And this is difficult for me to say what influences this this kind of style, because it's sort of intuitive, right? Mm-hmm. But honestly, so what I said in the very beginning, I started with studio photography. So that was a long time ago. Before I did street photography, I started with studio photography. So in another life, exactly. And I didn't do it for very long. But I remember, my first love of photography was studio photography, where, with light in the studio and with post-processing later, you are creating something which is normally impossible, right? So you created sort of another world. So something that was very, also a style which was very heavily used in advertising in the 2000s. It was a very popular style in commercial photography, where, compositing of different photographs together and working with light to create something that is very, which wouldn't be possible with a single photograph. And I think somewhere, although now these are typical street photography, candid documented moments, I think that also stays in the back of my head to, with one particular scene, to be able to create something which is surreal. I like the word surreal, where there is, and I think basically that's also, I always tried to photograph like one person in a scene, like a single lonely person surrounded by the urban areas, and which also I think gives this this surreal feeling. And I always love to photograph people that are sort of lost in their mind, thinking, kind of not necessarily interacting with anybody. Anyway, to answer your question, because this is a very long introduction, and I'm showing you photographs which aren't in the series that we are talking about. So I'm just showing you that this was also. I went to Paris last year in September, and sort of this was my plan for Paris. But now, just to talk about the technical side, these photographs and the technical aspect of them that sort of creates the look that I like, it requires strong sunlight, and that's something that I always look out for, because it's just the style that I like, and it does require very strong light, strong sunlight. Those are the places that I look for. I went to Paris last year with this sort of style in mind, but then just normal things. Weather completely changed, not according to plan, and because of the weather, I was already in Paris, and I had to think of something completely different. So this was very, now getting to the actual series, so this was actually a very mundane, not interesting reason for for the night photography. It's just weather, and that's it. But of course, being in Paris, you do think of the history of nightlife. So I think I always have that in the back of my head. That okay, you're in Paris, and you can't photograph during the day. Let's think of something interesting in the night, and the Paris nightlife and the history of Paris nightlife, the jazz, the dance clubs, the famous intellectuals and artists that always spend their time in Paris clubs, and so I thought it was interesting just to do this exploration of different scenes in the Paris nightlife. So it's something different that I usually do, but it's sort of a mixture of what I usually do with this idea of exploring Paris nightlife.
Vedendo anche il lavoro precedente, che non avevo, ho visto con voi poc'anzi, facendo poi anche il parallelo con quest'ultimo, mi pare, e lui l'ha anche espresso, questa sua attenzione nel controllo della luce in particolare, che gli permette forse di estraniare quel momento dal contesto e forse qui entra anche la sua capacità di filmmaker e quindi di storyteller. Diventa quasi uno still frame di una storia che poi a noi sta, come dire, in qualche modo ricostruirla, cioè partiamo da quello still frame per aggiungere con la nostra fantasia, con la nostra immaginazione i momenti successivi o che hanno appena preceduto quella particolare immagine. Può essere un'interpretazione corretta?
That's also a very big compliment for me, because this is sort of something that I aim for. So I don't know if I can say much about this besides that it's a great compliment, because that's what I always think of. I just it's my personal preference. I work also a lot. I'm a very big film fan, and so I think it's kind of automatic that I do want the photograph to look like a still from a movie, right? That it's part of the story, and so it's always I think it just comes also down to a very small thing, to the moment when you photograph somebody, right? It's just about the pose that this person has, because for example, if you photograph this person half second later, they will have a pose which doesn't have that continuation, what happened before and what will happen after. And so I always sort of automatically like to just capture this this moment. And yes, I do love when it does look like part of a bigger story, when you can actually sort of imagine what is happening before and after. And I'm just going through the series here. So.
Forse una mia curiosità, ma credo che possa appartenere a tutti noi. Ognuno cresce attraverso certamente le proprie esperienze, e questo dà anche la dimensione di una consapevolezza e di una conoscenza, ma poi ognuno di noi approfitta anche di quello che sono stati i grandi autori nella storia passata per poter arricchire il proprio immaginario, e credo che queste fotografie che ci vengono oggi proposte portino dentro di sé più o meno consapevolmente tanti altri nomi che appartengono alle nostre emozioni nel momento in cui li abbiamo scoperti, nel momento in cui abbiamo cercato di comprendere e di approfondire il loro lavoro. Mi piacerebbe capire se Christopher quali autori in qualche modo gli appartengono, che poi possiamo anche ritrovare in parte in queste immagini, anche per quanto riguarda la cinematografia. Io alcuni nomi me li sono fatti, o l'arte in generale, però non voglio azzardare e volevo chiedere a lui invece.
Right, so this is a difficult question for me, and I can't. It's hard for me to name very specific people, and I don't want it to sound like I'm not inspired by other people, because of course I am, and a lot. And to be honest, there's plenty. I'm also really bad with names, so I always forget. But there's plenty of authors that do inspire me. But with inspiration, right? It's of course there are specific authors that I love their work, of course. But with inspiration, I think you just kind of find it everywhere, and it can be somebody's work, or sometimes it's just a specific situation when you're walking and you see a specific light hitting a specific building, and how that's an idea,
Sì, il pensiero non era che come dire, c'è una traccia evidente, perché poi è un autore ed è capace, e lo vediamo, di esprimere la propria sensibilità di fronte al mondo che gli si offre dinanzi. Però tutti noi siamo portatori di letture, di scoperte, di entusiasmi, e questi elementi poi si depositano in frammenti nella nostra memoria, coscienza, eccetera, e in qualche modo poi collaborano tutti insieme ad anche un'ispirazione personale. Ognuno di noi avrà visto dei richiami. Un'ultima domanda, visto che siamo a Parigi ed è il titolo del lavoro premiato, l'ha già accennato precedentemente, ma chiudiamo con questa domanda. Questa Parigi, la sua Parigi, il volto della Parigi che ha incontrato, sembra quasi che c'è un'idea molto romantica dentro, nel senso che riscoprire quei luoghi che un tempo hanno fatto di Parigi la grande capitale del mondo per quanto riguarda la cultura. Siamo ai primi del Novecento, quindi Montmartre, il caffè di Saint-Germain. Era un po' l'intenzione di ritrovarla, oppure come è stato affrontato il viaggio?
Right, so also another very good compliment for me, because I think the word that very often is in my head is, which it's just a word that I like, is nostalgia. I like this nostalgic feeling, and if we go back to the previous photographs, the day ones, I like the feeling of nostalgia. So although we're photographing in a 21st century modern setting, and there's of course the setting is very modern, I do try to always avoid things that make it look too modern in the photograph, right? It's not always possible, but my intention is, there's like a very modern car in the scene. I'll try to maneuver without this very modern car in the scene, just to have this sense that, okay, it's 2023, but it could be also like 1995, or it's just about I do like the feeling of nostalgia and creating this illusion, if possible, because of course we're just documenting here. If we were to edit these photographs. Of course, we can make it to look like. It's more about. It's not necessarily technically about pretending that it's another era, but it's more about just the feeling that there is something that could look like it's from the past, which makes it look a bit nostalgic. That's my thought.
Non voglio così essere quell'unico che coglie l'occasione per fargli delle domande, quindi se qualcuno ha un desiderio di porre una domanda, visto che abbiamo l'autore qui presente, ben volentieri. Prego.
Buongiorno. Beh, innanzitutto complimenti per il lavoro, perché è un lavoro molto bello e emotivo, cioè trasmette molta emozione. E io quello che volevo chiedere, ho visto che c'è una grandissima cura nella costruzione, nell'inquadratura, nelle linee, e ci sono questi soggetti che appaiono nelle immagini a volte statici, a volte in movimento, ma sembrano proprio, sono nel posto giusto al momento giusto. Quindi la mia domanda è: quanto conta il momento, l'improvvisazione, lo scatto al volo, e quanto l'attesa?
Right, so what you said is actually, it's very true that I do pay a lot of attention to the composition. I'll start with the composition, but I think it can be an advantage and also sometimes disadvantage, because I think it just personally comes from my anxiety and my OCD, that I'm a person that needs to have everything symmetrical. So also, in the frame sometimes, I do like this person to be like perfectly, exactly where I want this person to be. So it sometimes can be, I think, a disadvantage, because I see photographs that are more rough and more, with frames, for example, a little bit sort of dynamic and a little bit, not straight, and and I like those photographs because it gives a completely different feeling, right? But with me personally, I do sort of always stick to the straight lines, and what I think is just my character too. That I like this symmetry. But to answer your second question about waiting. Yes, that is sort of something that I always say, that I think with street photography, for me, it's when we talked about inspiration, that you can be, it's a little bit inspiration, but honestly it's a lot of waiting, a lot of walking, waiting, and looking out, and for example, so sorry, because I started talking chaotically again. To simplify my answer, so I walk around. I do often have a situation where I see a scene which I like, right? For example, the architecture, the light, and there is a situation where I'm thinking, oh, I wish that there's nobody there, but I need to fill this place with somebody. I like the setting, I like the place, but I want somebody there who's not there. And then, so I do wait, and then there's one person and second and third, but it's not the people that I want. So I sometimes do wait, like standing in the street corner, for example. I've been in a street corner for like an hour and a half in one place, on the sidewalk, just waiting for, the right person to come. And also, which goes back to sort of my character, where I'm not brave enough to follow people with my camera. So I'm usually the person who finds the place, the location, the setting. Like I'm walking around, oh, this would be a good place. And then I don't follow the subject, but I sort of wait for the subject to enter the frame, right? So that's also, but a lot of waiting. And and also going back to the very beginning, like I said, I like to just go alone, walk alone, and this, you know, brings me comfort. But you can't do it in any other way than alone, because, you know, I can't go with somebody to photograph, because I will be waiting in a street corner for 1 hour, just standing in one place, in a place which is very not interesting for somebody else, right? So, yeah, so a lot of waiting, and you just sort of have to enjoy it, right?
Ecco qui, un'altra domanda.
In your reference and method, I find your work particularly interesting because I see your work in your work. I also see an homage of Cartier-Bresson, and also about the method, because Cartier-Bresson was known for La Savette. So the method of Cartier-Bresson,
the method of Cartier-Bresson was to find a place where something happened, and that was then it was called La Savette. And what I wondering, watching your pictures, if you had any difficulties taking picture of people, because also although you keep some distance, but it's a distance in which they could be aware of you. So because nowadays people are very aware of the image, and going from a city or a country, it became pretty tricky. So I want to know if you have had any difficulty in this work.
So regarding difficulties, what's interesting what you said, that you know also people do react, because it's not a great distance, it's not a telephoto lens, and people do see that you're photographing them. It's a safe distance for me to feel comfortable, but sometimes, yes, you know, they do see it, which makes me very nervous. But what is interesting, I think, what you said, because we're talking about Paris, but it's interesting if you go to different places and you see how people react to different places, because if you go to New York, Tokyo, and Paris, you get a completely different feeling from the people that you're photographing in the street. And for me, actually, I think Paris is one of the most difficult places, because although in my mind, street photography, you know, when I think of street photography, I'm thinking, you know, of the, you know, sort of most famous, it's like sort of, you know, the origins of in France and Paris, and that's what I think of. But although this is a culture and country which has a big history of street photography, it's also a country which very much likes its privacy, and I think Paris is one of the more difficult places, because I think, you know, for example, when you go to New York, people don't care, you know, do whatever you want, everybody's vlogging, doing something, you know, so you feel very sort of safe and protected as a street photographer. But I think in Paris people are a lot more aware. You know? And also regarding difficulties, it's a completely different topic, but if you're asking about difficulties, I don't think I with this series I had a lot of because one difficulty is the sort of mental difficulty of photographing people, and so quickly I just wanted to touch upon technical difficulties. It's night photography, it's handheld, it does look like there's a lot of light, but actually there's not a lot of light. So it is, you know, also with here there's a technical, I'm not a very technical photographer. I'm never, you know, I'm not a person who, oh, I need this camera because this camera has 5 frames per second, and I'm not a photographer that is like a pixel peeper, you know, 200%. Is this sharp or is it? It's more about the feeling. You don't care if this part is very sharp. It's more about the feeling, right? But so I don't focus that much on the technicalities. But there is one thing, because I used to photograph with DSLRs, with Nikon DSLRs, And recently, I think like 2 years ago, I switched to like the Fuji mirrorless cameras, and they have IBIS, so the stabilization, and that's something that, so I usually don't pay attention to the technical equipment, but this stabilization, IBIS, it does, especially with live photography, where you have shutter times of 1/10 of a second, it does give you a lot of just freedom, more freedom, just to do what you want to do. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't know, does,
Se non ci sono altre domande,
Did you get a sense that maybe you could do this kind of pictures as well in Trieste, or is it too soon to tell? How?
honestly, this is my first time in Trieste. I just arrived yesterday at 10 p.m. and the last week I didn't have any time. Also, sorry, I didn't really mentally prepare for talking here, so I don't know if I think I'm being a little bit chaotic, but I was like really sick the past week and I just got better. I came to Trieste yesterday. It took me a long time because I was stuck in Ljubljana for like 6 hours, never mind. And I just came here yesterday at 10 p.m. and my first thought was, wow, this is a place where I think, I would like to explore. So I've only, been here for like, yesterday at night and today I just woke up 1 hour ago and came here. So I haven't seen much, but from what I've seen, I really like it. So. And it does look like a great place to explore in terms of street photography.
però mi pare che l'attrezzatura ce l'abbia, quindi non si sa mai.
Excuse me?
Mi sembra che comunque l'attrezzatura tu ce l'abbia alle portata, quindi non si sa mai.
Yes.
Bene, grazie mille, grazie a voi, grazie di molto.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.